In this video, I'm going to be doing a tier list for every single Mega Evolution that is currently available in Pokemon GO, as well as the ones that will eventually get released. Now, something to keep in mind is that this is a kind of a remake video. I did make a tier list for all of the Mega Evolutions that are currently available in Pokemon GO recently, and I felt like I needed to remake that video because I had a lot of very notable exclusions, and in general, I did want to include future Mega Evolutions and kind of speculate on how important they are going to be. And yeah, that's what this video is going to be. So let's roll the intro and jump right into it. Alright, let's jump into this tier list. So there's going to be a lot of Pokemon on this list that I know a lot of people are not going to agree with, mainly because I'm only going to be looking at how powerful they are in battle. That includes PvP and raid battles, and I'm not necessarily going to be ranking them based on how useful they are in terms of gaining candies or anything like that. Of course, that is a major part of Mega Evolutions, and I totally recognize that, but a lot of these Pokemon are really just good for raid battles, and some of them are only good for collecting candies. So if there is a Mega Evolution that is in the trash tier, but you think it deserves to be a lot higher because of its utility, then make sure you say so in the comments below. Alright, so without further ado, let's get right into it. So, first and foremost, we have Mega Venusaur. This is a grass-type Mega Evolution, and it is actually pretty good. But I'm actually going to put it in the C tier, and that is going to be quite different from what people would expect. It is a very powerful grass-type Pokemon, but I really do not necessarily think it is good enough to be among the top tier. And there's going to be much better Pokemon with its typing that you will see in the A tier or possibly even in the S tier. Now, let's move on to both Charizard. So this is Charizard X, I believe, Mega Charizard X. This one's going to be in the B tier, and the reason for that is because it is really strong in raid battles, and it also has a very unique type combination of Dragon and Fire, which I actually think is going to be pretty useful for a lot of different raids. I mean, it's basically a beefed up version of Reshiram, which is currently the #1 non-Mega and non-Shadow Fire type raid attacker. So yeah, Mega Charizard X, it's definitely going to be there in the B tier. It's not necessarily going to be the absolute best in terms of Dragon-type Mega Evolutions or Fire-type Mega Evolutions, but it is definitely up there. Next up, we got Mega Charizard Y. This one I'm actually going to put in the A tier. Now, the reason why I'm differentiating these two is because Mega Charizard Y actually has the flying typing along with its fire typing. Why is that important? Well, there's not that many Mega Evolutions that actively give you a bonus for flying types, but Mega Charizard Y actually fits that bill. On top of that, it also has high enough stats where it's going to be really good in raid battles compared to the other Mega Evolutions that have a flying type. So that is something you do need to keep in mind. It is actually a Mega Evolution that is worth investing into. Alright, so next let's move on to Blastoise. Now, if you saw my original tier list video for Mega Evolutions, you would know that I put this in the trash tier. This time around, I'm actually going to put it in the D tier. Now, the reason for that is because as a water-type raid attacker, it is actually pretty strong, and it's also quite tanky as well compared to the other water-type Mega Evolutions. And the reason for that is because it does have a lot more on the defensive end when it comes to its stats, and that's going to allow it to last a lot longer in battle, which will allow you to actually keep it in battle to give you that water-type bonus to all of your raid mates. So yeah, I actually think it's worthy of being in the D tier rather than the trash tier, and yeah, it's for all the reasons that I listed. Next up, we got Mega Beedrill. This one is going to be a C tier Mega Evolution. It certainly is the absolute best poison type Mega Evolution when it comes to raids, but there are very few scenarios where poison type is going to be the absolute ideal. Like, even if you're going up against fairy type raid bosses, you would probably want to go with a steel type instead. So yeah, because of that, I would say Mega Beedrill is more in the C tier. There's going to be very few instances where you're actually going to use it, and that's really unfortunate because I do think it is one of the most accessible Mega Evolutions. And yeah, if you're talking about collecting candies through Mega Evolutions, well, it's going to have both the bug typing and the poison typing, which is going to allow you to get extra candies for a lot of different Pokemon that you typically see very often. Next up, we got Mega Pidgeot. This one is going to be in the C tier as well. It is a very powerful Mega Evolution, but again, because of Mega Charizard Y, I really feel like there's very little reason for you to invest in a Mega Pidgeot. It is very strong, don't get me wrong, but in terms of flying types, I just feel like Mega Charizard Y does everything that Mega Pidgeot does, but a whole lot better. So unfortunately, it's going to be a C tier. It's not bad enough to be a D tier or a trash tier, but it is not necessarily going to be good enough to be in the upper tiers. Next up, we got Mega Alakazam. This is going to be an easy A tier. Now, the reason why I say that is because it has an incredible amount of DPS. It is a hard-hitting Psychic type Mega Evolution, and it also has a move pool that is incredibly diverse in terms of typing. So it's incredibly versatile and can fit into most different raid groups. So yeah, because of that, I have to say it is an A tier. It is also a bit of a glass cannon, but yeah, it's going to deal a lot of damage before it gets knocked out. Next up, we got Mega Slowbro. This is going to be a C tier Mega Evolution. Again, when it comes to Psychic types and Water types, there's a lot better options out there. And yeah, you're really only going to be using it to collect XL candies and regular candies. I mean, it's not necessarily that good in terms of its stats as well. I would actually make the argument that it belongs in the D tier. I mean, it is a very powerful Pokemon, but you know, because of the move pool and because of the typing and the better Mega Evolutions that are available for those typings, I can't really make an argument for it to be anywhere up here. So yeah, unfortunately, it's going to be a D tier, somewhere between D and C, because it still can be useful, but I'm actually going to land it on the D tier. Alright, next we got Mega Gengar, one of the highest DPS Mega Evolutions in the game, and because of that, it is an easy A tier. Much like Mega Alakazam, it is a glass cannon, and yeah, it has the poison typing and the ghost typing, which makes it incredibly versatile for a lot of different raid bosses. But something really important you need to keep in mind is that Gengar is weak against Psychic type damage, so you know, if you're going to be using it during Psychic type raids, like, yeah, it's going to deal a lot of damage really quickly, but there is a chance that it could get knocked out really quickly because it is a glass cannon and it takes super effective damage from Psychic types. So that is something you do have to keep in mind. It is a bit of a risk reward considering how powerful it is, but yeah, it's also very squishy as well. Next up, we got Kangaskhan, Mega Kangaskhan. This is going to be our first trash tier. The only utility that you could really find for Mega Kangaskhan is, of course, its diverse move pool, but in general, there's going to be so many better options than Mega Kangaskhan. It's basically there as a candy farming tool. Like, there's no reason for you to have a maxed out Mega Kangaskhan in your party. Like, there's going to be so many better options in terms of Mega Evolution. So when it comes to raid battles and when it comes to PvP, you can skip out on using Mega Kangaskhan. It's really not going to do you that much good. Alright, next up we got Mega Pinsir, and it's one of the most recent Mega Evolutions that are not legendary that was released into Pokemon GO. This one is going to be a B tier. Now, the reason why I say it is a B tier is because it is currently one of the top bug type raid attackers in the game, and bug types are extremely hard to come by when it comes to decent raid damage. Mega Pinsir does fit that bill. If you're going up against a boss that is weak against bug types, like Dark type Pokemon and I don't know, Psychic type Pokemon, it could actually come in very handy. So yeah, Mega Pinsir is a very easy B tier. It's of course not going to be good enough to be an A tier, but it is definitely deserving to be at least in the B tier. Next up we got Mega Gyarados. This is another A tier Mega Evolution. It is incredibly powerful when it comes to raid damage, and it does have a very diverse move pool as well. So if you're going up against a Psychic type raid boss or a Fire type raid boss, or maybe a raid boss that has both of those typings, Mega Gyarados is your one-stop shop. It has a plethora of different moves that you could bring with it, and it's going to deal a lot of damage. So yeah, Mega Gyarados is a definite A-tier Pokemon. It's really strong, and it's definitely worth investing into. Next up, we got Mega Aerodactyl. This one is going to be a C tier, and it's for a lot of the same reasons as these other Pokemon. It is incredibly strong on its own, but it does get outshined by a lot of other Mega Evolutions that we're going to get into. It is a very powerful Rock type, but there is a better Rock type Mega Evolution. And it's also a good Flying type, but again, there are better Flying type options. So Mega Aerodactyl, no matter how popular it is and no matter how iconic it is going to be, unfortunately, a C tier Mega Evolution. Next up, we got the two Mega Mewtwo's, and yeah, these are obvious choices. These are both going to be S tiers when they come out. They may actually be the absolute best Mega Evolutions in the game once they come out. When it comes to Mega Mewtwo X and Y, I think they're going to completely break Pokemon Go once they come out. They're going to trivialize a lot of raids. Like, they deal so much damage, and they're going to have a very diverse move pool. So you could pretty much use them in a lot of different raids, not just raids that are weak against Psychic. So yeah, you really should be investing in your 100% or near 100% Mewtwo's because they are going to dominate Pokemon Go once their Mega Evolutions get released. Next up, we got Mega Ampharos. This is going to be a C tier Mega Evolution, and the reason for that is because it is not necessarily going to be the absolute best when it comes to Dragon types and when it comes to Electric types. That is something that is very unique about it, is that it does gain that Dragon typing, which does kind of make it like a beefed up version of Zekrom. But again, there are better options when it comes to Dragon types or Electric types when it comes to Mega Evolutions. So yeah, that's something you need to keep in mind. Next up, we got Mega Steelix. This is going to be a B tier Pokemon, and it's because it has the Steel typing as well as the Ground typing, which are both Megas that are going to be useful in a variety of different raids. The other thing is that Mega Steelix is incredibly tanky, which means it's going to be in battle a lot longer than most other Pokemon, which means you're going to be giving that Mega Evolution bonus to your raid party a lot longer. Yeah, it is a solid B tier Pokemon. And I really do think it could potentially become an A tier if it were to be able to deal a lot more damage. It has a really good move pool, but it doesn't have the stats that makes it a very good raid attacker. It's just there to last longer to give the bonus. So yeah, it's B tier, not good enough to be an A tier or S tier. Let's move right along. We got Mega Scizor, and this one is another B tier. Yeah, it's really good. It's one of the best Megas that are not legendary, in my opinion. The only problem is it is incredibly squishy. It does have a double weakness to fire, so it's not necessarily going to be that useful in a variety of situations where you would think it would be useful. Plus, of course, when it comes to its typing, Steel and Bug, there are better options out there for both of those, and yeah, in spite of those shortcomings, it does deal an incredible amount of DPS, almost to the levels of Gengar. So you know, it is definitely worth investing into. I do think there's going to be certain situations where it's going to be the most ideal. And yeah, I do think it's something you do need to keep in mind. Next up, we got Mega Heracross. This is going to be an A tier Pokemon. It's incredibly powerful in terms of its stats, and I do think it's going to make a big difference in Pokemon Go. Bug types and fighting types are both incredibly rare, especially when it comes to Mega Evolutions. So I do think it's going to make a huge difference once it comes out. The next up is Mega Houndoom. This one is going to be actually a B tier. Now, the reason why I say it's a B tier is because of that dark typing. It is incredibly powerful when it comes to dark type raid damage, so it is something you should not ignore. So yeah, simply put, it is a solid B tier. Next up, we got Mega Tyranitar. This is another A tier Mega Evolution. The reason for that is because when it comes to rock type damage and dark type damage, it's pretty much up there in the top tier. It's also incredibly tanky, which does means it's going to last longer in battle, but it also deals a lot of DPS. It kind of has the trifecta. So it's not necessarily going to be an S tier. I think those spots are reserved for very specific Pokemon, but it's definitely teetering on the edge. Like it's really like, if there's an A plus tier, like that's where it would be. Like, it's really good. I've used it a lot of times in raids, and I have to say it's incredibly useful. So yeah, I think it's a solid A tier. And let's move right along. Next up, we got the 3 Hoenn starters, and all 3 of them are going to be A tiers. It's pretty easy why they are A tier. They deal an incredible amount of DPS. Like, all 3 of them are basically glass cannons. And yeah, I think their typing is also really good as well. Sceptile has the Dragon and Grass typing, which is going to be incredibly useful in a variety of different raids. Blaziken is Fire and Fighting, which is amazing when it comes to Mega Evolutions. And then Swampert is, of course, Ground and Water. All 3 of these Pokemon are useful in a variety of different raids, and all 3 of them are pretty easy to get. Like, the Mega Energy for all 3 of these Pokemon, maybe because they are kind of new, is not that difficult at all. Like, you know, they're pretty often returning to raids, so you can collect their Mega Energy that way, but they also generate a lot of energy through walking. So yeah, I do think all 3 of these are solid A tier picks. Next up, we got Mega Gardevoir, and this one is going to be a B tier Mega Evolution. Now, I was kind of struggling with this because I wanted to put it up in the A tier, mainly because of its niche use as a fairy type raid attacker. But yeah, I've used it a couple of times, and I have to say it's not necessarily top tier. Like, it's definitely going to be useful when you need fairy type raid damage, but, you know, other than that, there really isn't any other time where I feel like it is useful. So, yeah, it's a solid B tier pick, and I do think it has the potential to be at least an A tier, but it's really going to depend on how many raid bosses come out that are weak against fairy types, and how many different PvE encounters require a fairy typing, like Team Go Rocket Battles or something like that. So yeah, it's a solid B tier. Let's move right along. We got Mega Sableye. This one's going to be a D tier or a C tier. Let me think. I actually think it's going to be a D tier. It will be useful for PvP, but there's going to be better options for PvP, like whenever they are available for the Master League. And Mega Sableye, much like its non-Mega version, it's kind of a niche PvP Pokemon. I think some people will make the argument that it could be useful in raid battles, but let's talk about it. So, Ghost typing, we have Mega Gengar. We also have a couple of other Mega Legendaries that we're going to get into. And then when it comes to Dark typings, we have Mega Houndoom, as well as other Dark types. I just really can't find a place where this is going to be the absolute top tier. It will eventually come out and things might change, but right now it is going to be among the D tier, which is very unfortunate. And next up, we have Mega Mawile, and another D tier. It's for the same reasons. Like, it's really good, probably, like when it eventually comes out, but I do think there's going to be better options, and that's quite unfortunate. Alright, next we got Mega Aggron. Now, this one, a lot of people will say is a trash tier or a D tier because it does not deal a lot of DPS, but it does have incredible tankiness. Like, it lasts long in battle. So, for the types that it brings, you're going to have those type bonuses for a very long time. I really do think Mega Aggron is a little bit underrated because of that one fact, but of course, because it doesn't deal that much damage, and that's mainly what a lot of players are looking for when it comes to Mega Evolutions, it's going to be a solid C tier. Next up, we got Mega Medicham. Now, this one is going to be in the D tier for a lot of the same reasons as Mega Sableye and Mega Mawile. It's going to pretty much fall. Like, it's not necessarily going to be top tier. And, you know, I really wish it was because I myself am a frequent user of Medicham in PvP. So when its Mega Evolution came out, I was a little bit excited. I thought that it would actually be useful in some way. But unfortunately, there's always better options when it comes to raid damage, and there really is no other case where you could make that this Mega Evolution is necessary. Maybe one day in PvP, like maybe it will be allowed in the Ultra League one day. That would be very interesting, but other than that, I really do not think it has any place in Pokemon Go. Alright, next let's move on to Mega Manectric. This one is going to be an A tier. Now the reason why I say that is because it is incredible in terms of DPS, and it also has that electric typing, which a lot of raid bosses surprisingly have a weakness to electric types. So, you know, if you need that electric type DPS, Mega Manectric is your way to go. And yeah, I do think it synergizes really well with other Pokemon that people would bring that are glass cannons, like the Zekrom and Electivire, like Shadow Electivire. I really do think it has a lot of uses in Pokemon Go that a lot of players do not necessarily notice. It is a solid A tier Pokemon for that reason. And let's move right along. Sharpedo, Mega Sharpedo. This is a Pokemon that has not yet been released in Pokemon Go, or at least the Mega Evolution of it. This one's going to be a B tier. Now, I actually think it has the potential to be an A tier, especially when it comes to Dark type DPS. But as of right now, because we do not necessarily know how effective it's going to be, I'm going to slap it in the B tier. But again, I do think it has potential. It could potentially be one of the top DPS Dark types in the game when it eventually comes out. And then we got Mega Camerupt. I predict that this is going to be a C tier Mega Evolution. Like, when it comes to ground types and when it comes to fire types, there's obviously a lot better options out there. And I really do not know if it's going to be that useful. It could potentially be tanky, like Mega Aggron, and I think because of that, it could be useful. But yeah, in terms of offensive power, I think it lacks quite a lot, or it's going to when it gets released. But in terms of raid DPS, I think it's going to fall short, and I think that's pretty accurate considering how it is when it's not Mega Evolved. Next up, we got Mega Altaria. This is another trash tier Pokemon. Now, the last time I made this tier list video, a lot of people were complaining that I ranked it so low, but I really do think it's not necessarily that good. Like, if you're talking about collecting candies, yeah, maybe it can be useful, but again, there's a lot better Pokemon that have the almost exact same typing that are going to give you candy a lot more. So, I don't know. Like, I really can't make a case for Mega Altaria being anywhere up here. Like, maybe in PvP, but again, it's kind of like Mega Medicham, right? Like, it's only going to be interesting if it ever gets released in the Ultra League. Like, Master League, it's not necessarily going to fit in. It's going to get outclassed by a lot of other Pokemon, most of which we're going to get into later. So, yeah. Next up, we got Mega Banette. This is a very powerful Ghost-type Pokemon. It does kind of fall short compared to Mega Gengar in terms of DPS, but it is a pure Ghost-type, which means it's not going to have that pitfall that Mega Gengar has, where it's going to be weak against Psychic-type damage. So, Mega Banette is really good. Like, it's a great second option when it comes to Ghost-type Mega Evolution. So, yeah, solid B-tier pick right there. Next up, we got a Absol. I almost said Abomasnow. No, we're not there yet. Mega Absol. Now, this one's a little bit tricky because I kind of want to put it in the B tier, but I'm actually going to put it in the C tier. It's really good, but in terms of dark type damage, I think Mega Houndoom kind of edges it out. So yeah, it's basically going to be a solid second option to something that is already a B tier. And yeah, that's really unfortunate. It's definitely never going to keep up with Pokemon like Mega Tyranitar, but it is there. Like, yeah, that's the best way to describe Mega Absol. It's just there. Next up, we got Mega Glalie. This is a top Ice-type raid attacker, and Ice types are something that are very important, especially if you're going up against bosses like Mega Rayquaza. It is going to be a B tier for that reason. Now, I do think it has the potential to be even higher, but there is an Ice type that I actually find to be a lot more powerful in terms of raid DPS, which I'll get into later. Next up, we got Mega Salamence. This is an A tier. Now, there is a Mega Evolution that just came out that we are going to get into very shortly that completely outclasses Mega Salamence in every way. The only thing is, Mega Salamence, collecting Mega Energy for it is a lot easier. And I do think because of that, it is going to be something that will allow it to stay in the A tier. It's definitely really good. It's a top Dragon-type raid attacker, and it does have really good stats that allows it to stay in battle a lot longer. So, yeah, solid A tier pick, and I do think it's going to be really hard for this to ever fall down. Next up, we got Mega Metagross. And this one's going to be an A tier when it eventually comes out. It's going to be the absolute best Steel-type raid attacker in the game, by far. And I do think it's going to have a lot more utility outside of that. It could even become one of the top generalists in the game as well. I'm pretty sure you've used a non-Mega Evolved Metagross in raid battles in PvP. It is incredible, and I'm very confident that the Mega Evolution is going to keep that trend. Next up, we got both Latios and Latias. Now, these are going to be C-tier Mega Evolutions. It's pretty straightforward. When it comes to Psychic types and Dragon types, there's better options out there, and collecting Mega Energy for both of these Pokemon are incredibly difficult. It's really not worth the effort of collecting Mega Energy for these because, I mean, there's going to be better Dragon-type raid attackers, and there's going to be better Psychic-type raid attackers like these three. I really cannot find a place where both of these Pokemon are going to be incredibly useful. And it's funny because Mega Latias does come with a very powerful moveset. It's just not necessarily going to deal that much DPS compared to these other Mega Evolutions. Yeah, it's going to be C tier for both of them. Next, let's move on to the three most powerful Mega Evolutions in the game, at least in my opinion. And of course, two of them are not even technically Mega Evolutions. They're Primal Reversions. These are Primal Kyogre, Primal Groudon, and Mega Rayquaza. All three of these are currently available in Pokemon GO for this weekend on Pokemon GO Fest. And yeah, all three of them are S tier. Like, there's no question about it. Like, Kyogre, for example, top water-type raid attacker in the game, by far. Primal Groudon, it is the top ground-type raid attacker and one of the top fire-type raid attackers right now. And both of them have a very unique raid mechanic in that they actually kind of change the weather. So they're going to give their Mega Evolution damage bonus permanently when you use them. that is something that a lot of players tend to forget about when it comes to both of these Pokemon. They are really strong, and they actually have a lot more utility than most of the other Pokemon that are on here. So yeah, they are solid S tier Pokemon, and there's no question about it. And then, of course, we have Mega Rayquaza, which is one of the newest, if not the newest, actually, yeah, it is the newest Mega Evolution in the game. And it's incredibly powerful. It definitely lives up to the hype. A lot of players were actively anticipating this Pokemon's release, and I definitely think it lives up to the hype. It is incredibly powerful in terms of raid damage, Team Go Rocket battles, gym battles, wherever you want to use it, and it's going to deal some of the most damage regardless of the typing. It is really strong. Now, the only caveat is that it is incredibly difficult to get. You do need to get a Meteorite first and teach it the move Dragon Ascent, which is a very powerful flying type move on its own, but yeah, it's incredibly difficult, and there's a lot of hoops you have to jump through in order to get this one Mega Evolution. So better options possibly do exist when it comes to flying type or dragon type raid damage, but in general, if you are able to get Mega Rayquaza, it is going to be your top option, no matter what. Next up, we got Mega Lopunny. Unfortunately, this is a D tier. The only real use for this that I can think of is the fighting type rated damage, but again, this is a world where we have Mega Blaziken, so I really do not necessarily know if this is going to be your solid first choice. It might be good for collecting candy, like you can Mega Evolve a Mega Lopunny and then go out and collect candies for fighting types and normal types, but outside of that, I really cannot find a case where you will use Mega Lopunny more actively than most of these other Mega Evolutions. Next up, we got Mega Garchomp. This is, of course, a Mega Evolution that is currently not available in Pokemon Go, but I do think it's going to be a solid A tier when it does come out. It's really strong in terms of its damage, or at least that's what's being speculated, but I do think that because of how useful regular Garchomp is, I think the Mega Evolution is going to be equally as useful. And of course, we got Mega Lucario, which, again, it's going to be up here in the A tier. It does have a unique type combination, and when it comes to fighting types, it's really difficult to actually have Mega Evolutions that will boost up fighting types. So yeah, Mega Lucario is going to be incredible when it comes out. And then, of course, we got Mega Abomasnow, which is the top Ice-type raid attacker in the game, and that is going to be a B tier, right next to the other top Ice-type raid attacker, which is Mega Glalie. Now, Mega Abomasnow does deal more DPS than Mega Glalie. The only problem is it is a lot squishier, so it's going to last in battle a lot less. And on top of that, it also has a Grass typing, which means if you're using this Pokemon going up against flying type legendary raids or regular raids, that's going to be a problem because a lot of flying type damage is going to knock out this Pokemon really quickly. So because of that, I really can't find myself putting it in the A tier, but it's definitely going to be nestled right next to Mega Glalie in the B tier. Alright, we're coming down to the wire. Next up, we got Mega Gallade. This one is going to be an A tier when it comes out. Psychic and Fighting is a very unique type combination, and it does have a lot of versatility. I think it's going to be one of the top tier when it comes to either of those types when it comes out. Of course, it's not necessarily going to be as good as Mewtwo, but I do think it's going to be really good. Alright, next up we got Mega Audino. This one's going to be a D tier when it comes out. Now, we really do not know. It might actually be a lot more useful, but I really can't see myself using Mega Audino compared to most of these other Pokemon. I mean, it's possible that it will be really good, but I really do not know. Until we know for sure, I'm going to nestle it in the D tier. Alright, finally we got Mega Diancie. Mega Diancie, it's one of the new ones that was introduced this year with Pokemon Go Fest. I originally had it in the S tier, but after actually using it a couple of times, I'm actually going to have it in the A tier. Now the reason for that is simply because it doesn't deal as much damage as I thought it would. It does have a very unique type combination of Rock and Fairy, and that is definitely something you will not want to ignore. But yeah, in terms of raid DPS, I was a little bit disappointed when I actually used it. So yeah, Mega Diancie is a solid A tier, but it's not necessarily going to be good enough to be among the best of the best. Alright, so there you have it. These were every single Mega Evolution that is currently available in Pokemon Go and the ones that are going to be available in Pokemon Go, ranked in a tier list based on how strong they are in raids and PvE and PvP. Now, of course, I did not take into account their utility. Like, some of these Pokemon are going to be incredible for collecting candies. Like, Mega Medicham might actually be useful in a fighting type or psychic type themed event. Like, there are some things you need to factor in, like stuff like that. But in general, I think this is pretty accurate when it comes to raid DPS, even for the ones that have not yet been released. I think this is how it's all going to fall down. But yeah, I do think this is mostly speculation and opinion, so I do think there's going to be a lot of you that are going to disagree with me. If that is one of you, definitely share that in the comments down below. I would love to know your reasoning why your tier list would be different. Share all of those thoughts, and let's have a great discussion. Thank you so much for making it to this point in the video. If you ended up enjoying it and found it to be informative, make sure you hit that thumbs up button and subscribe if it's your first time here. And don't forget that little bell so you can stay up to date on whenever I upload videos. And I want to give a quick shout out to my patrons on Patreon. You all make this channel content possible. If you want to support my channel in any way, big or small, then do consider joining me on Patreon. For all my patrons, they get a permanent spot on my in-game friends list. So if you want to join me for raids with remote raid invites and different things like that, then do consider joining me on Patreon. And also, if you want to support my channel non-monetarily, you could do so by following me on social media. I'm over on the following platforms. You could find me at Jinsula. So yeah, make sure you go there and follow me there. And that's going to be it for this video. I'm Jinsula. Be safe, have fun, love yourself, and I'll catch you all later.